Thanks very much, Robert. Very nice to be here. Thank you very much for the invite. And I'd like to take the opportunity to say I think this is a great example of how the CBD sector in the UK is really booming. I mean, you look around you and it's really impressive for the first event of its kind in the UK. So well done to the organisers. As Robert said, my name is Tim Phillips. I'm from CBD-Intel, and we are a business intelligence service for the CBD sector. And we focus globally, but we are actually focused on markets outside of North America. So we try and kind of provide a bit of insight into what is going on in the global CBD markets. And funnily enough, we started this business last year, and I think at the time it was seen as a rather niche area of what is, particularly in North America, seen as a much larger marijuana sector in general. And I think that's probably changed, and certainly this year with the passage of the Farm Bill gone through in the US, we're seeing a lot of focus back onto CBD and particularly on international expansion. A little bit about us. CBD Intel is made up of just over 30 analysts. We're based in we have a London, UK office, and in fact, most of the analyst team is based in Barcelona in Spain. We're much better known, I have to say, for a sister publication called CBD Intelligence, which is a data service for the vaping sector. So we come from that side of the business, but we saw an opportunity, I think, to provide the same kind of services that we have been providing for vaping for CBD. There's clearly quite a lot of crossovers, and I think in many ways the growth of the CBD sector reminds me a lot of vaping 5 years ago or so. We're independent. I think it's very important to say that we're an independent data source, and particularly in the cannabis space, that is going to be very important. There's too many people out there making ridiculous claims about what the market size might be in the future for the cannabis space, and I think what's really needed is an independent source of data that's, that's actually grounded on proper data. We already provide our services to the FDA in the US, who look at our vaping data, and potentially they will start looking at CBD much more closely. We saw Scott Gottlieb last week talking about in April they're going to do an insight into how to regulate CBD in the US. So I think there's going to be a lot more oversight from the FDA in the US. We've also worked with the British government in terms of looking at impact assessments for the vaping sector. So when the Tobacco Products Directive came in and regulation came into the UK for the vaping space, and I suspect that we're going to see the same sort of insight going on in the UK around CBD. And you only have to look around you, this is becoming a sizable sector, so government will get involved for sure. Right, I'm going to talk just a few things that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk a little bit about the opportunity. What's going on with CBD? And let's focus a bit further afield than just the UK. What's going on in Europe? What's going on globally? We're going to talk a little bit about some of the regulations, but I'm not going to go into the depth of those regulations. I know there have been some other speakers talking about how the novel food regulations might apply in the UK, and there's a lot of debate. But what we're going to have to get used to in terms of regulation is the fact that things are going to change. It's very fluid at the moment, and there's going to be developments that we're going to be covering. We're going to then talk a little bit about the market, what is going on in the market, particularly in the UK, but also more generally in Europe. Where are we in terms of different kinds of products? What's going on in the market? I think I wanted to give you guys some kind of data to look at that. And then at the end, we'll talk a little bit about what the opportunities are and the potential market size. Okay, so here's my first statement there. CBD is the biggest near-term opportunity. I always make this point. I've done a few presentations in the US recently, and I think maybe I need to say this less here in the UK, but certainly for North American players in the cannabis space, I think it's really important to say to them that CBD is the only really near-term opportunity for the cannabis sector as a whole in Europe. And so if you're a cannabis company, if you're a Canadian-listed company, and you've got plans in the, to expand internationally, and most of them do because of the valuations that apply to these companies, they really need to look at expansion. CBD is the opportunity at the moment. We're not going to see recreational markets opening up in Europe anytime soon. My view is you're unlikely to see that happening in the next 5 years at the earliest, in my view. So, and whilst medical markets are already opening up in Europe, and they will continue to do so, they're still really, really small. The German medical market, for example, is roughly $25 million at the moment, and that's still pretty small, and it's certainly very small compared to CBD in Germany. So CBD is really important. Why is it important? Well, it's because of the regulatory environment that it sits in. It sits in this kind of middle ground between medical regulation on one side, so the sort of big movements politically around opening up medical markets, and that will continue to happen. CBD doesn't sit within that, and neither does it sit within the recreational markets that we've seen opening up in the US and Canada. It sits very much in the middle. It's seen as a health and wellness product, and clearly it's much more kind of acceptable from a public policy perspective than THC-containing products. So I think we're going to continue to see this kind of middle ground. Why do I think it's, why do I think it's comparable, if you like, to the vaping markets? It's because it's a very consumer-driven market as well. So we're seeing consumers getting on board with CBD, buying CBD, without above-the-line marketing, without people going out making medical claims, without huge marketing campaigns around the products. It's driven by consumers who hear about the product, they're told about it by friends and family, they read about it on social media, and they buy. And so it's got this kind of grassroots groundswell of growth. As a result of which, the market is very fragmented, and it's very difficult to figure out what's going on, right? Because you've got a lot of different brands in the market, you've got a lot of different distribution channels. So we're going to talk a little bit about that fragmentation and what it means for the sector. Where are the major markets globally? Well, clearly we've got big markets developing here in the UK. Look around you, there is a big market already developed. But I think the focus internationally is very much on affluent countries, so high GDP, high knowledge and awareness of kind of health and wellness products. So I think mostly that's going to be European countries. We're going to see a few Asian countries. I was in Japan at the end of last year. That's a really interesting market, just starting to bubble up. And then I think affluent markets in other areas of the world are where the consumer end markets are going to develop. What's also kind of interesting to look at is where are the growing markets, where are the production markets going to end up. And I think one of the things that we're going to see over time is the commoditization of CBD, about the production. The production is likely to move to countries where it's much easier to grow and produce. And there's going to be a consequent decline in the price of wholesale CBD over time. Okay, I've talked a bit about the fragmented market. We'll come back to that, but it's fragmented from the product perspective. So CBD is going into a huge range of different products. It's going into lots and lots of different distribution channels. And we're already seeing some issues around quality and labeling and how does that kind of work. So we'll come back to some of those themes. Regulation, of course, is very fragmented as well. The way that countries are looking at regulating CBD is already fragmenting, and we're definitely not going to see harmonization of this sector. Another thing just to mention at the end there, big business, right? There's been an awful lot of interest from some big companies, and there's a lot of rumor, but there's also quite a lot of money being put in. So, two examples there of Altria's investment in Kronos Group in Canada, and Constellation Brands were the biggest, obviously, example of that with their investment in Canopy Growth. Okay, quick point on regulation. And as I said to you, I'm not going to go into the details of the novel food regulations and some of the details that we've got going on at the moment. I think the main takeaway from this is that it's constantly in change, right? This is a sector that is very quickly growing. Regulation always takes time to catch up with the reality on the ground. So we're going to see regulations change dramatically over the next few months and years. Clearly, as I said, CBD sits in between these kind of two areas, the sort of the narcotics regulation on one side or I guess recreational use if that ever happens over here, and then medical regulations on the other side. And we are going to see over the next few months and years a conflict between those different areas. And CBD still sits in the middle of that, but it's quite clear that the pharmaceutical industry on one side is going to say, hold on, how can these guys sell a product that we're also selling as a pharmaceutical, right? Similarly, there is public policy issues around the fact that the CBD industry obviously sits within cannabis as a space, and the public policy issues around that are always going to be complicated. So quick point on all of this. So where are we in Europe? I'm going to focus a bit on Europe. Well, clearly there is a set of hemp legislation. There's plenty of hemp grown all around Europe. There are some very complicated rules around exactly what you can and can't do with your hemp crop. And they differ between countries, and there are some basic rules, and clearly there are some basic rules around what kind of seeds can you use from the European catalogue. So there's a species requirement within the cannabis space. You can only grow certain types of cannabis plant, which are deemed to be hemp. There's a THC limit, right? So 0.2% of THC is your limit for growing, and slightly different in the US, 0.3%, slightly different in some other countries like Switzerland, where it's 1%. But that in principle is kind of the major area. What then turns into more complicated areas is what bits of the plant can you use to develop CBD? What can you do with your biomass? And what we're seeing in reality in Europe is a kind of cat and mouse game, if you like, of growing in one country and then shipping biomass to another country to do the extraction process, and then shipping the extracted product to another country to put into a product. And it's really, really complex. So, that will inevitably, I think, get cleared up over time. There will be regulations that start to kind of clear this area up a bit. As I said, restrictions on using flour. So in the UK, technically, you're not allowed to use the flour. We all know that. There are some, ridiculous methods that companies we know are using to ensure that the flour is not used. And frankly, I think a lot of it is basically ignored by the industry. Now, that's fine for now, but there are going to be problems. And I think as the sector continues to grow and government starts to look at this and become more aware of it as a sector, we're going to start to see some clamping down and some enforcement on that. Once the CBD has been extracted as an isolate product, it's basically a consumer product, right? Legally, that's the sort of starting position. But then whatever product it's put into, that you then have a new set of regulations around the product that it's in. So clearly we've got all of these issues with the novel food and the novel food catalogue, and whether or not CBD is a novel food. My personal view is it will be, inevitably, right? There's going to be lots of fights, there's going to be lots of legal challenges, and we heard a bit of talk about that earlier on today. But effectively, I suspect that it will be a novel food. The industry is going to have to get used to the fact that some regulation is going to exist around putting CBD into edible products, whether that's an oil or a food product or a beverage. We've got some markets where we're starting to get flour being sold. So particularly Italy and Switzerland, we're getting this cannabis light market grow. Very interesting. It's being tolerated right now by the authorities. You've got companies like Lidl selling cannabis light. Amazing. If you can go and buy it in Switzerland in a Lidl. I suspect that will start to change over time, and the regulations are going to develop around that. Topicals and creams. We get asked a lot about topicals and creams, and it's again a slightly unclear area. We have a European regulation around what you can put into a topical or a cream, and in theory, right, that prohibits your use of CBD in topicals. But in reality, we're seeing a lot of countries ignore that, and certainly in the UK, and look around you, you can see a lot of topical products using CBD. So again, that's a whole area that's going to develop over time. And then finally, as a product category, vape is, again, in development. It seems that CBD in vape is kind of growing very fast. It's not currently regulated in any particular way, but we're going to probably see some more kind of insight into that, and potentially European legislation start to look at it a bit more carefully. All right, product diversity. So very quickly, tons of products. We're tracking, here's some tracking from 5 major European markets: UK, Germany, France, Italy, and Netherlands. We tracked 50 different types of products that have CBD in them. And clearly, I'll come and show you what some of the major product form factors are, but it's quite amazing that, that consumers are buying CBD hummus. I mean, I don't know who buys CBD hummus, but there's obviously a market for it. All right, here's some information about what are the major product form factors, right? So very clearly, these are 3 markets: UK, France, and Germany. We've done surveys in each of these of 1,000 consumers, and it's very clear that oil dominates all of those markets. There's some differences between the different markets in terms of what is of next most importance. Interestingly, Germany has really quite a big flower market developing, and France is very strong on vape, so e-liquids containing CBD is pretty important. But you can see some consistency there between the different markets, and as we expand this to other European markets and global markets, I think we're going to see the same kind of picture emerge. Purchase channels, rather interestingly, so we've still got online being a major distribution channel for CBD. That won't surprise any of you, I'm sure. It reminds me very much of the early days of the vaping markets, where online was also very dominant in terms of a channel. But as this sector, right, I'm being told I've got 5 minutes, right, I've got to speed up. As this sector kind of consolidates and becomes more mainstream, we're going to see different types of retail environments emerge as major areas. Okay, pricing, right? There's a major issue with pricing at the moment. So here are 2 brands, same product. In fact, the more expensive one has less CBD in it. There's a difference there between £13 on the left and £240 on the right. There is a major issue. How on earth are consumers going to understand the difference and making a buying decision between those 2 products? So this is going to consolidate over time, right? And partly it's going to consolidate because we think the wholesale price of CBD is going to dramatically decrease over time. For those of you interested, pricing for CBD, okay, is between $6,000, $7,000 a kilo at the moment. Nicotine, very similar kind of product in terms of extraction. Nicotine, just so you know, and put it in context, is around $200 to $250 a kilo. So there's a major difference between those 2. All right, I'm going to move on because Robert's lurking in the corner there, but I'm going to just quickly say, right, massive pricing differential between the different markets. We've got some more data that just shows that pricing is really, really variable, right? Some survey results. So how long have consumers been using CBD? It's very clear that it's a new sector, right? We've got majority of consumers across Europe have not used it for more than a year. So no surprises there, I guess. What are people planning to do? What are they doing at the moment? 80% of them are using it at least daily. That's pretty interesting. And what are they planning to do? Well, there's a great majority of them who are planning to use the same or more CBD in the future. Right, I'm going to go past this. I mean, there's some issues around consumers, right? There's definitely an issue with consumers understanding what CBD dosage to use, and that's coming very clearly. Half the consumers are not understanding how much they should be using, right? So there's an industry requirement to try and educate consumers better. Is it better than traditional medicine? Arguably, I think this is a bit of a leading question, but quite interesting, right? Lots of a very consistent view across those 3 countries that consumers of CBD agree with the statement that it's better than traditional medicine. So, huge potential opportunity for the sector. And then some of the factors around, why people are choosing CBD. I think the 3 things to pull out here. Price is very important. And given that we're seeing massive price differential, I think that's pretty interesting. Organic, a very major issue there, and then trustworthy retailers. So there's an issue around the industry being trusted and educating the customer. Final slide, Robert, you'll be pleased to know. these are just like, where are we? What you notice I haven't done is put up any slides around market size. We do have some market size estimates, but they're very nascent at the moment. It's a very, very difficult industry to size, as you'll appreciate. I just wanted to put this up for the last slide, really. What is the potential opportunity for the sector? And I think if you just look at some of these areas and see the size of the markets that they're in right now, you can see quite clearly that CBD has a really quite big future. I think what's very important for sustained growth is that the industry is aware of these issues that it has. It educates the customer better, and that's all I'm going to say because Robert's already on the stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tim. I really appreciate that. Ladies and gentlemen, Tim, his stand is just behind the stage here, so if you have any questions for him, please do catch up with him there. If you'd like to put your hands together, please, for Mr. Tim Phillips from CBD Intel. Thank you.